Hi everyone, welcome to the second of these lockdown chats where I go over my back catalogue from the last couple of months, look at some of the thinkers and theories that I've explored on then and now, and see if they can offer us any insights when it comes to this time of pandemic. Today I'm going to look at Stoicism, a topic I covered a few weeks ago, so I may be a little rusty, but if you haven't seen that video, maybe go and watch now because a lot of this won't make sense without having seen it. But other than that, let's get stuck straight in. Tiny recap. I think the two parts of Stoicism that are useful when it comes to coronavirus are the element of control, the Stoic emphasis on what's in our control and what's not, and the element of living according to our own nature. And these two things are almost one and the same for the Stoics. And they had an interesting logical proof as to why you have to focus on these two things, which I found interesting and convincing. It went something like this. If Stoic philosophy is a guide to how to live a good life, for the Greeks, living a good life meant living virtuously, which had a very different meaning, or had a slightly different meaning to what it means today. To live virtuously means living an excellent life, living to your full potential. And in doing this, it means we'll lead good lives for ourselves and the world and those around us. So it's about focusing on living in accordance to your full potential and the world. And so the first thing that we need to do to live according to our nature and according to our own potential as humans is to follow the impulse towards self-preservation. We also need to categorize things into whether they're good or bad for us. So the impulse to self-preservation means, for example, the impulse towards food, sex, shelter, procreation, all the rest of it. But even these things can't be universally always good for us or bad for us. You know, sometimes food is good for us, yes, but often it can be bad for us. We can eat too much, we can eat at the wrong times. And the only thing that is a guide to when we should be eating is our own reason, our own minds. So this is why the Stoics really put reason on a pedestal, that this was the only guide to how to live a good, virtuous, excellent life that lives up to our full potential. And reason is about learning what is in our control. And reason is really the only thing we can control in its entirety. So let's try and apply that quickly to what's going on. A few of the readings I've been looking at and a few of the pieces on Stoicism and coronavirus I thought were a little bit limited, a little bit banal. They say things like the Stoics would advise against hoarding toilet paper. And while this is true, it's probably the case for all ethical systems, even hedonism. I doubt any ethical system advises us to hoard as much toilet paper as possible. Two articles I thought were particularly interesting is one by Jeremy Cliff in the New Statesman. It talks about the cultural influence of Stoicism, how it's central to our identity in the West especially. Talks about how it's a great historical article actually. It really historicizes how Stoicism's been threaded into our cultural consciousness. He talks about how Seneca's play Phaedra was the first play to be performed during the Renaissance, how Stoicism informed and influenced Reformation thought and Enlightenment thought, of course, how figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Frederick the Great all read the Stoics. And most interestingly, how Adam Smith's Invisible Hand of the Market, of course, very central to our identity, our intellectual identity anyway, in European history, how that was influenced by the Stoic idea of there being a natural order to things. So I'd recommend that one. I'd also recommend, I'll put links to these in the description by the way, I'd also recommend Massimo Pigliucci's article on Stoicism. He comes at it from a unique angle, and as to be expected, because he's one of the world's foremost experts on on Stoicism. He argues that the current pandemic proves how the Stoics were right about needing to study physics, logic, and ethics, which did all mean, again, different things to how we understand them today. But physics for the Stoics is just studying the world. It could include theology as well as modern physics, but studying the facts of the world. He says, of course, coronavirus shows we need to understand coronavirus. We need to understand how it spreads, its mortality rate, its symptomless period, etc. Then the Stoics argue we should also be studying logic. He says, of course, we all need to understand how best to approach the crisis logically, how often to wash our hands, what our goals should be during the pandemic, how often we should be going out, socially distancing, all the rest of it. And then the ethical part, living excellently during what's going on, which is what I will focus on now briefly. So what can Stoicism tell us about what's going on? Or how can it help us when it comes to what's going on? I mean, there are obvious ways in which we can focus on the things that are rationally in our control and those that are not. Of course, it's not in our control whether we get the virus, how much it spreads, etc., other than through washing our hands, social distancing, following the rules. So, according to the Stoics, we should put out of our mind all these worries that we have no control over and really try and focus on the things that we do. I think that is reasonably obvious. One of the things I thought would be useful, or is useful for me anyway, is, I imagine there's a lot of job insecurity. Well, there is a lot of job insecurity. A lot of people have financial worries about recession. Afterwards, and of course the Stoics would advise against worrying about that, but internalizing how we think about those things. So internalizing means you don't worry about the things that are external, but there are parts that might have an effect on you and that you can connect with through an internalization of your attitudes and your goals. So for example, you can't control whether you lose your job or whether you get a job, but you can control how well prepared you are, how well honed your skills are, how well qualified you are, how well practiced, all the rest of it. So I do think this is a good time to follow Marcus Aurelius's advice on meditating on what your goals might be at the moment, what issues you want to address. We all have a lot of time on our hands during lockdown. It's not in our control whether we're given work, whether we get clients, whether we run out of cash, but we might sit and think, okay, it's in my control to work on that new skill I've been meaning to work on that, to build that website that I've always wanted to build, to rethink my approach to an issue at work so that my boss values me more when we go back, recognizing new opportunities and innovating. Which leads me on to one final point, that obvious problem with the Stoics that I think hopefully we might be able to discuss in the comments. Let me know what you think, is that Stoicism has a kind of callousness and a coldness to it, and in its reputation anyway, because it recommends that stiff upper lip mentality about getting on with it and not moaning. But when you read the Stoics, you can put it into a framework that doesn't just mean, living under the current political conditions that you disagree with and just getting on with it and, not bitching and moaning about politics or what have you in the economic system you live under. Because it is in your control still to have strong arguments for changing the way we live, of convincing people that there are better ways, of, arguing why we should have stronger social security nets and social welfare and all the rest of it. So you can fit these things into the Stoic system. And I think the Stoic system does offer a good way of thinking, well, okay, it's rational for me to get angry about these things, arguably, although I do have some issues with that. But in principle, It's irrational for me to get angry with these things, but it's rational and in my control to best think about where I can place my efforts to make a difference, small or large. So I'll leave it there today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think about this new format. Don't worry, I am working on a new video which should come out next week, a normal video that's on the topic of trust, which I've just finished writing. I need to record. But yeah, comment, like, share. Please remember, hit that bell. That's probably the most important thing you can do to get alerted to new videos. And thanks for watching. See you next time.